good evening. I'd like to introduce our participants, our speakers for this session. We have Professor Olapade from the University of Chicago. I think most of us know who she is. She's a Nigerian who is based in the United States and collaborates a lot. And most of us know her. She's my chief mentor, I would say. So I've known her for many years. And she's here to present on the ARETTA study, the JCO recently. Then we also have Dr. Atara and Ntekim from the University of Ibadan, a radiation oncologist, or say a clinical oncologist who also collaborated on this study. And we are here to discuss the importance of this study with breast cancer awareness in Africa, as well as outcomes of our breast cancer and research on the continent. And least of all, I will introduce myself. My name is Dr. Werner van der Poy. I'm a clinical oncologist in Accra, Ghana, and the treasurer for Aortic. And I welcome you all to this very important meeting to discuss the ARETTA study. So I'll start with a few questions, which is like, what has been your experience with breast cancer research in Africa, mainly Nigeria? This goes to Prof. Olopade.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this chat. And I hope that we would have a really good conversation about breast cancer, especially as it relates to women across sub-Saharan Africa. I trained in Nigeria, and I was a house officer in the surgical oncology unit that Professor Sholanke ran for decades in Nigeria. And that unit actually also was known for its really leading scholarship in breast cancer. And Professor Ajayi, who also really became a famous breast cancer surgeon, and then trained really outstanding generation of surgeons in Nigeria, really got me thinking about breast cancer even before I came to the US. What shocked me when I got to the US was that we also had breast cancer patients in the US who are Black presenting like the patients who presented in East 2 in those days. And I could not really figure out what was the difference between the patients that I took care of as a house officer in that unit and now, in my practice in the United States. So I've been fortunate not only to take care of breast cancer patients in Africa, but also to come to America and take care of breast cancer patients. So when I'm talking about the face of breast cancer, it's because of my own personal journey, my own experience, and the suffering of breast cancer patients all across the world. It's not just limited to sub-Saharan Africa. So my work now makes me really focus on what can we do as a global oncology community to make sure we support and we treat breast cancer no matter where that woman lives. So that where you live will not determine whether you live after a diagnosis of breast cancer.
Thank you very much. But why is breast cancer of importance to you as a research topic?
Well, so, this is one of the things that we talk about when we start talking about diversity of scholarship. I trained as a cancer geneticist. I have a laboratory, and my work was on leukemia and lymphoma for several years as I was growing up in hematology oncology. I became really a breast cancer researcher the minute we identified BRCA1 as a gene that predisposed women to breast cancer. And I started really thinking about, wow, there's a gene that actually makes you get breast cancer. Why don't we then integrate my interest in doing genetics, which is at the somatic level, with doing genetics at the germline personal level. And that's what we're talking about now with precision oncology. I started studying women, and as soon as BRCA1 was identified, it became women who were coming to my clinic. My clinic was not set up just to find women with breast cancer. But as you know, women are the ones who lead healthcare purchases for their family. We know BRCA1 is not just a gene that predisposes to breast cancer. It's breast cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer. But it was women, and in celebration of October, Pink Month, it was women who were marching. You know, they were marching, and I saw them marching in Washington and asking for more research to end breast cancer, to eradicate breast cancer. And they wanted anyone, it didn't matter where you were doing your research, to come and get grants to study breast cancer. So I applied for an IDEA grant from the US Department of Defense. And I just asked, you know, I have this idea. If I go back to Nigeria and collaborate with people who are in Nigeria, of course, my sister-in-law, who is also a geneticist, but her work was in sickle cell disease, said, why don't you do this genetic research on Nigerian women as well? Because we have all these women who are sitting there, we have nothing to treat them. Maybe we can understand how BRCA1 works in these women. So in January 1997, you know, having gotten, you know, the idea to study Nigerian women from my sister-in-law, Professor Falusi, we wrote to the Department of Defense, and we got collaborators. You know, at that time, Professor Adebamowo, Dr. Adebamowo had actually started working in East2, and introduced myself to Professor Ajayi, and Professor Ajayi helped us, you know, really put the team together to study Nigerian women. And so breast cancer became a passion for me, because even though we had a gene, the most important risk factor for breast cancer is that you're a woman. And for a very long time, there were no women studying breast cancer on the African continent. They were all giant men, surgeons, who were doing breast cancer research on the continent. So I then took on the mantra to get more women trained to begin to study breast cancer. That's really why it became important to me. Not that I wanted to choose it, but women gave me the first money to start my research in breast cancer. And so I wear pink, and we raise a lot of money, we raise awareness. And now, of course, we hope that men will join us to study breast cancer. But that's really the story of how, you know, cancer research and biomedical research has evolved on the African continent.
Thank you very much. That is very inspiring. You talked a lot about Nigeria. Is this research being done in other parts of Africa as well?
Well, as you know, Dr. Van der Poy, you were one of the first Africans to come to train with me in Chicago, right? Because having seen the light, I really wanted to make sure that this was not just about Nigeria, although, you know, Nigeria is the giant of Africa. But my work took me all over Africa. In fact, the first paper we published once we started really studying, doing this work in Nigeria, was I went to Senegal. We had the first aortic meeting in Ghana, and then the next meeting was in Senegal. And I met with the pathologist in Senegal, and we started collaborating. And if it wasn't for that really wonderful collaboration between pathologists in Nigeria and pathologists in Senegal, we would never have been able to show that triple negative breast cancer is overrepresented in African women. Everyone kept saying, you know, our study was not true. Even my collaborator, Dr. Adebamowo, wrote a paper against what we had found in Nigeria and published it. But we thought, well, you know what? I can only vouch for the work that we're doing. And then we went to Senegal. Then, of course, we started collaborating with the Ghana breast cancer study. And at least in West Africa, the finding that majority of those women get ER-negative aggressive breast cancer at a younger age is been replicated across all these countries in West Africa. As you know, West Africa forms the #1 gene pool for African Americans in the US. And because most African Americans come from West Africa, we also know that across the African diaspora in the Caribbean, among African American, triple negative breast cancer, ER-negative breast cancer is overrepresented, right? It's not the only type of breast cancer that they get, but it is overrepresented. And I just want AORTIC to take credit for that, because we started meeting the first meeting was in Ghana, and then we went to Senegal, where I was able to collaborate with my colleagues in Senegal. And then, of course, we've taken meetings all over Africa. We've been developing the African Oncogenetics Network. Every AORTIC meeting, we have had a workshop really trying to get Africans to understand the genetic basis of breast cancer. And I'm really very proud of the work that AORTIC has done, because there are other studies now that have been looking at South African women, East African women. And what I tell everybody is that Africa is the most diverse continent. We need to do research in every country for us to understand the genetic basis of cancer all over the world, because we form the root of the entire world. So some of the things that we learn and we discover in Africa is going to help everybody. So I'm really proud that the work that started, because AORTIC went to have a meeting on the African continent, and we got collaborations across Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, and Cameroon. We were able to collaborate with Paul Undom, who was president of AORTIC, and we started collaborating with researchers in Cameroon, in Uganda. We just really wanted to get a sampling of what was going on across the continent, and we have published extensively. We know a lot about risk factors across this continent because we were able to put a team together to collaborate using the AORTIC platform.
Thank you. This is a lot, and it's something that we need to move forward and expand further, because we're now understanding the basis of breast cancer, and will help us to improve our treatments. The next question goes to Atara. Is molecular profiling of breast cancer readily available in Nigeria and West Africa?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. Now, molecular profiling of breast cancer in West Africa. Well, we only have access to this information based on the research studies. Now, right now, molecular profiling as a clinical investigation is not yet available in West Africa. Now, what we are having is the issue of having the immunohistochemistry aspect. That one is well established in most West African cities, but then most of the hospitals, the immunohistochemistry studies that can actually classify patients, whether they are ER positive, ER negative, Her2 positive, is available in few centers. It's not widespread yet in West Africa. And so that is the position that we have now.
Okay.
So I'll go to my next. To add to that, it was really the study that we after we started our research in Nigeria, the Nigerian Medical Women's Association. I remember when we had a workshop, the esteemed Professor Fatima Abdul Karim actually was one of the rapporteurs for that workshop that was in Lagos in 2004. And they had a communique, and in that communique, they said, we need to establish an immunohistochemistry laboratory in Nigeria. And it was the first immunohistochemistry lab or in any country in sub-Saharan Africa, because prior to that, we had been told that everybody has ER positive breast cancer, just give them tamoxifen and go. And that is the worst thing that's happened to people on the African continent. That is the vestiges of colonialism that allow people to look at Africa from the European lens. And so I'm really, really, really fortunate to have been a member of AORTIC, to have used the AORTIC platform to do studies in Nigeria. I remember when you had your survey looking at what resources people had on the African continent. And we were just trying to see all these oncologists that were coming to AORTIC. What did they have? Nothing. Because everyone keeps saying, you know, that breast cancer is not a problem on the African continent. Breast cancer is not an issue. And it wasn't until AORTIC actually wrote a position paper to take to the African Union that even the WHO started taking cancer seriously on the African continent. So if there's nothing I have learned over the last 20 plus years that I have been a member of AORTIC, it's that when you have a strong organization like AORTIC that is run by Africans, for Africans, they're going to be able to influence policy even at the global level.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we are updating the survey very soon to see what the state of breast cancer management is in Africa, also from AORTIC. So I would like to dive in more into the topic of this meeting, which is, tell us about the ARETTA trial. What inspired you to set up this ARETTA trial, the general aims, objectives, methodology, and the outcomes so far?
Yeah, so there have been 2 attempts that I have made to try and treat breast cancer in Nigeria, and also breast cancer across the African continent. So, you know, I trained as a medical oncologist, actually as a hematology oncologist. And for you to get your training in America, you have to first be an internist. So once I made up my mind, I wasn't going to become a surgeon like Professor Sholanke and Professor Ajayi. Then the question is, what can I do in oncology? That's when Professor Dr. Williams, Dr. C.K. Williams, was the first medical oncologist to come back to Nigeria and to treat patients in my medical school in Ibadan. And he had we had this bottle, which is the red drug called adriamycin. And then we had patients with Burkitt's lymphoma. And when you call when you call Dr. Williams, C.K. Williams, these tumors will just melt with just putting the drug in a patient. You can imagine as an intern on a pediatric floor in Ibadan, putting drugs into a patient and finding the cancer melted. So once I came to America and I realized that you can actually treat cancer patients, you can use drugs, I then became an internist. So I did my training in internal medicine and then subspecialty training in hematology oncology. Hematology in Africa and most African countries is a laboratory science, right? You're just doing, testing, transfusion, and all of that. But in the US, hematologists, oncologists are treating leukemia lymphoma. They are curing leukemia lymphoma. And I saw so many children, so many patients respond to therapy. So that's why I then said, okay, how can we start treating cancer patients in Africa with medicines? And as you know, Dr. Holland, God bless his soul, James Holland wrote the textbook of cancer medicine. He trained Dr. C.K. Williams. So we have a legacy in AORTIC of using medicines to cure cancer, right? The first cure for cancer, which is cure for Hodgkin's lymphoma, was developed by oncologists in Uganda who didn't have fancy medications, didn't have fancy radiotherapy, didn't have fancy surgery, but they were able to use what they had to cure patients. By being able to use that to cure patients with cancer, we have a model now. And that's why I went first to Roche to get us Xeloda. And we tried to do a clinical trial of Xeloda for triple negative, for women with locally advanced breast cancer. We failed at our first attempt at it, but we actually published the paper because we were able to recruit 18 patients. And 3 of those patients actually had a complete pathologic response to Xeloda, right? Some of those women are still alive today in Nigeria without recurrence. So that gave me proof of principle that if you actually do a clinical trial well, that there's a chance that we can cure more patients. Except the problem is most women in sub-Saharan Africa present late. And we heard that it's late stage at diagnosis, it's already metastatic. And from our genomic studies in Africa, we know that these are cancers that cannot wait, right? Everybody will tell you, you can get your mammogram every 2 years. Oh, maybe you don't even need a mammogram. No, if you're going to get ER-negative breast cancer, waiting every 2 years to get a mammogram is sure going to kill you, because these cancers have a very shortened trajectory. So we also know that Her2 positive breast cancer was the most lethal type of breast cancer. And then when we did our studies in Nigeria, we published on the genomic architecture of breast cancer in Nigeria. We found that 30% of the patients had Her2 positive breast cancer, which is now the most curable breast cancer. So while people have been talking about triple negative, what we found is it's ER negative and Her2 positive. And so I went back again, and by this time, Breast Cancer Research Foundation, an amazing foundation in the US, Susan G. Komen, had allowed us to actually giving me money as a Komen scholar, and they gave me money to treat patients with breast cancer in Nigeria, because Komen believes that where you live should not determine whether you live. And then Breast Cancer Research Foundation gave us money to develop a clinical trials infrastructure. As you know, these are not very, to do a clinical trial is very expensive. One patient getting on the ARETTA clinical trial in Nigeria will probably cost us close to $15,000. Nigerian women cannot afford to pay for that, right? Luckily, Roche gave us drug. So they gave us the drug, but they still are not going to support us to do the clinical trial, because there's no one who has clinical trial experience in the places that we started the work. So thank God we have had several people come to the US for capacity building training. Dr. Fatih Regun, Dr. Ntekim. I remember Dr. Ntekim wrote a protocol. He wanted to do CMF because that was what they could afford. And after his visit in our lab, I was like, how can I be using CMF on my own people when I know better, right? So that's why we change what is, let's just try something, to no, we're going to do the best study that is possible. So we are leapfrogging to make it possible for Africans to have access to the best treatment, so that we're not going to go through what they can afford. We're going to go through what is possible by using biomarkers to put patients on the study. So that's really how ARETTA got started. And Dr. Ntekim has to take credit for all of it, because without him putting his neck on the, training himself, maybe Dr. Atara, you can, Ntekim, you can tell them how much effort you took to go and learn how to become a medical oncologist.
I think that's the next question. So I'll ask Dr. Ntekim, how many sites do you have for the study right now? How many sites do you have for the study right now? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I'm hearing you quite well. We have 4 sites, and then of course the University of Chicago is our supervisor. So we also take them as an additional site, maybe supervisory. Now, currently, let me just go a little bit down memory lane. This is October Pink Month. Now, usually with the assistance of Professor Olopade, we were able to establish the first multidisciplinary breast cancer team in Ibadan. Now, this team meets regularly to look at our patients and then discuss the management. Now, this team usually every October also do some outreach activities in order to enlighten the women on breast cancer using physical discussions, town hall meetings, radio jingles, and so on and so forth. What we found out was that usually after such exercise, we have an upsurge of women coming for screening using mammogram or ultrasound or clinical breast examination. Now, when they come like that, most of them, we identify breast cancer in few of them, but sometimes there's nothing more that we could do because they don't have money to advance other treatments. And so it became a problem that in most cases in our NDT discussions, we see women who have started treatment but could not afford it, or some who have been confirmed to have breast cancer but they couldn't actually afford it. So it became a concern. Now, the background to this is that, well, in Nigeria, we have to know for cancer treatment, patients pay out of pocket. Even though there is a national health insurance, but it only covers like 2% of the population because it's mostly on public servants. And when it started, even that 2% cancer treatment was not included. It is only now that they start bringing in few drugs. So that means almost 80% or 85% of our patients have to pay out of pocket. Well, this is different. I know in few other countries in Africa, there are some free treatments for cancer patients, but in Nigeria, that is not the case. And most of our people are poor. And so this brought us the initial plan. We just wanted a protocol at least. Even if we don't have funding, let's just raise money and buy CMF for these patients who couldn't afford anything, because CMF was then the most less expensive chemotherapy combination. And so during one of our meetings, Professor Olapade came in to the country, and then we discussed this. And then when I showed her my protocol, she just shook face because it was not properly written, let me put it so. So she now said, okay, that she will, since we have that intention, that she will assist us. And that was how she was able to arrange some other trainings. Through her initiative and push, I was able to go to the Novartis Institute for Biomedical Research in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And then from there, I did my fellowship there in the translational oncology unit. And that was where I was actually assisted and put through in the development of a industry standard clinical trial protocol. And then with those experiences, I also had the knowledge that, well, that molecular studies are even important now in any breast cancer study. So from there, I was still able to get some funding to go to Germany for 2 years under the Ruth and Adolf Merkel Fellowship to do clinical oncology. It was in that program that we had a full course in clinical trials. And so with those small theoretical backing, I now thought, okay, then we could be able to do clinical trials in Nigeria. Now the issue of, well, biomarker understanding also came up. So along the line, I was still able to do a Master of Research program at University of Nottingham. So that now placed me in a position to be able to anchor a comprehensive clinical trials that we could be able to interface between the laboratory, the clinics, and then all the other regulatory things and so on. And along the line, with our mentorship also had an NIH grant for that's a mentor training in the clinical trials administration and organization and implementation. Through that, I have also been mentored in the clinical trial activities. So that is how we came up And so this study evolved based on the initial concept that we had. And then Roche was able to support us, as she mentioned earlier, and we were able to bring up the ARETTA study. Now, the full meaning of ARETTA is actually assessing response to neoadjuvant Taxotere and Trastuzumab in Nigerian women with HER2 positive breast cancer. Now, this is the first study that we have as a team that we are implementing in order to test run our systems and then look at how feasible it will be for other trials that we are planning to have. Now, we have 4 centers that I mentioned earlier, the University of Ibadan, and the University of Lagos, Lagos State University, and Obafemi Awolowo University in Ife. Those 4 centers were the pilot centers that we started this trial with. And this is based on the fact that these centers are prior collaboration in molecular research with the Professor Fumi's group. And then we said that because a lot of things have been invested in those groups, we started with this group first with the intention of expanding to other centers in Nigeria, and then in West Africa and in Sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you.
Okay, so how did you identify your investigators and other support staff for the procedures? How did you identify them?
Yes, we went through a long process. First, we had to rely on those who have been on previous collaborative studies in the team. Yes, so that is how we got the principal investigators. And then we now had to go to each of the centers to look around who the other team members could be. Now, initially, it went through some processes. We sent out a questionnaire to those that we identified as the principal investigators in the 4 sites for them to list the facilities that they have, and then also the trainees, the possible trainees or possible team members for the program. So they sent a list, and then later on there was a team to visit the centers to actually identify who these people were. Now the team was made from the team from the University of Chicago, and then the Roche also sent a team that went for like an initial site assessment visit. And so the team visited all the sites, looked at all the available facilities. It was just an assessment, and then also look at the personnel on ground, and then we were able to identify who the personnel were and what facilities were ready. And then from there, we look at how to improve on those facilities and the personnel. So following that, she has mentioned about some funding that she got from the organizations and so on. So we were able to organize training in phases to the team members to bring them up to the level of conducting international trials. Now, the facilities were also very low in many of the centers. So part of the funding was also used to improve the facilities. And then the team also interfaces with the management of each of the hospitals. It was a very hectic effort trying to see, because some of the infrastructure needed remodeling, some painting the buildings and so on. So they were able to interact with the management of each of the centers. And fortunately for us, all the management were supportive of the program. And she also took a step further to meet with the ministers of health, and then also the commissioners for health in the states where the hospitals were located, because sometimes the funding has to be approved at those sources. And all of them were interested at that time, because it now became important that clinical trials are desirable within the community. And so they were all very cooperative and then supported our initiative. And so that was how we were able to improve on the facilities at the 4 centers to be able to conduct clinical trials, and then also train personnel. Now, some group of personnel were actually trained de novo because there was nothing. When they came, there was no group at all in the country that could do oncology clinical trials monitoring. So she also arranged for almost 2 years training to train monitors that are now monitoring their clinical trials. She had to link up with one private CRO in the US who handled the training. And then now we have full-fledged team that can do clinical trial monitoring to any level in the whole country. So.
Okay, so I think this ARETTA is going to be a springboard for other clinical trials, not only in Africa, but probably going to the rest of, not only Nigeria, but to spring forward to Ghana and the rest of Africa, Ghana first, of course.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think you truly are an African researcher because you've touched on all the points that I know are headaches in Africa in terms of the training, identifying people, the funding, the collaboration with the government. But how do you manage all of this with your very busy time?
So,
yeah.
So, I don't know whether that question is to me or to Dr.
Both of you, actually.
Yeah. So let me take it from my vantage point. I have been coming to Africa and I love Africa, and it's almost as if I live in Nigeria because I tell everybody I'm giving back the gift that Nigeria gave me because I went to medical school free. And so I owe Nigeria a lot. But when you get to a place in choosing the sites that we can do the trial, because everybody asks me, there's sometimes when you make political decisions and sometimes you have to make pragmatic decisions, right? For me, the only thing that was pragmatic for me was to be able to use the Ibadan multidisciplinary group to start this program. They self-organized and they brought themselves together. I have not said anything about Professor Obajimi, but after they saw what was going on in the United States, they organized themselves. And then they wrote the first protocol. And by writing the first protocol, it is easier for somebody to help you, right? But if you don't take the first step, it is not doable, right? And that was why, Dr. Ntekim got time out. The hospital gave him time out. He probably even paid for it, the money himself, to come out and work at Novartis Biomedical Research Institute, where Novartis was willing to help him revise the protocol and learn the protocol. And I'm sure that 3 months in, shuttling between Chicago and Boston, you must have felt, what am I getting into? This is a waste of my time. But he had to have that protected time to be able to sit down and do the work. And after he got that protected time, because I'm saying this to you because you cannot serve two masters. You can't be running around doing private practice, trying to support yourself, make money, and then also do academic work, right? He got that protected time, and it was his institution that gave him that money, not me, right? Then after that, he got even more interested and he got to go and do a master's degree, right? And I think Dr. Fatih Regun had the same experience. They came, they got some observership, and then went to do additional training. Without additional training, protected time, you will not know how to even begin. So we chose to start with the Ibadan multidisciplinary team because we knew Dr. Atara Ntekim actually knows what to do. So it was a question of now supporting him to be able to do the work. And then, of course, he was able to get funding from the National Cancer Institute. So he got a K43 Oncology Global Leadership Award. And we've used that to support him. This 4 sites, it is a credit to Dr. Ntekim because he got his people together, and you have to start small. When we are pragmatic and we can show we can do it, we chose the 4 sites for the sites that we can drive to in 1 day in Nigeria, because I'm running in, getting into the country, visiting all the 4 sites in 2 days with my husband and I running helter-skelter, because we also have jobs in the US. We cannot be there. So unless we have people on the ground to take the study, there's no way we could have done it. So people ask me, why aren't you here? And why aren't you there? And I'm like, I'm not a politician. I'm not in the Nigerian government. I'm not even the African Union. I'm just one investigator partnering with colleagues who want to partner with us. And so, Dr. Ntekim, over to you, but you did all the work.
How long would you say it took from completing the trial to enrolling your first patient?
Completing the preparations.
Yes.
Completing your training. Yeah.
No, the protocol, completing the protocol and enrolling your first patient onto the trial.
Yeah, the protocol completion was, well, it was evolving. The protocol evolved through so many stages. And then by the time, because initially we didn't have funding, so that is where it was not it's not really able to answer that question very straightforward. Now, when the protocol was being prepared, we were looking for funding as well. And then alongside, we were also looking for funding to improve infrastructure. So the protocol was completed longer than we expected, because even when the protocol was already in place, we were still trying to improve infrastructure, because we identified that, oh, we need this, we need this, we need that. So now, but the trial was actually launched in Nigeria in August 2019. So let me just put it so, but the first person was enrolled into the trial in April 2020. So that means the launching marked the end of completing all the preparations. And then we had some issues because we were new. We didn't actually, even the oncology clinical trial is new in Nigeria. Though there are other clinical trials in maybe malaria, infectious diseases. So we couldn't actually get our steps right with NAFDAC. NAFDAC is the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration in Nigeria. So we had some delays with them because while preparing, we forgot that we needed to understand NAFDAC procedures. So it was when we were now ready to submit our license, our application for approval, that we now got to know some of the things that we needed to have done, which we couldn't do. So, but now we now know better. There's a new trial now. We have learned all the steps and so on. So that brought a little bit of delay. And then when it was on, the COVID-19 issue now came in. So that was why we had some delay in actually starting the protocol after the launching in August last year.
Yeah. Thank you. You look like we don't have that much time left. I've just been warned that we only have 14 minutes. But I would like to say that what would be your recommendations for, you've talked a lot about what we can do, but we can see that we have to involve a whole set of people, including our governments, without which we can't do anything, our institutions, our personal time, and we have to learn to collaborate also with other people, including the pharmaceuticals. Even though the drugs were probably from one company, the other company was also willing to contribute, because you have a mixture of drugs. You don't give just one drug for. So this was a very good collaboration between the two organizations. But how were you able to do that? Because they kind of like don't listen to us in Africa because they say we don't give them that much money. So how were you able to put that on, Dr. Olapade?
Yeah, well, so, you know, it's people have said no to me so many times, but I don't give up, right? And so we know that to actually move the field forward, you have to have all the stakeholders at the table. Yeah. And I think Nigerian women pushed because they also will come out during Pink Month, during the awareness. And you can see that we also started having advocates. We have breast cancer advocates that will come to meetings in America and they will participate. And as a result of that, I was able to ask Komen as a Komen scholar to support me, and by giving me funding, I can use that platform to go to pharmaceutical companies and say, if you give me money, I will deliver. And they see that we're publishing. And when the Roche group that came to look at the site, they went to the site and they said, none of the site is ready, but boy, everybody is smart, right? They came to Nigeria and they from South Africa, and they were like, oh my goodness, these people are smart. Why are they not part of clinical trials? We had done clinical trials in Eastern Europe. So why can't we do it in Africa? So it was a question of having us ready, being ready to accept the drug, and then having the company actually go to see that people are trying, because everybody will tell you why it cannot be done. And I say, we can do it if we support our partners. So even with COVID, we always focus on our partners. What can we do to help? They don't have PPE. Okay, let's go and get money to them to get PPE. There are resources there. It's just we have to be willing to share. So everything in my lab, I share with everybody in Nigeria. And if we have something in Chicago, because of the way that Nigerians have contributed to our understanding of breast cancer in African Americans, then my rule is they must have it in our partner site as well. That is what mutual collaboration, mutual respect demands. And I can't just sit here knowing that my partners are afraid of COVID. So if whatever we are doing, and that's what I think global cancer research is about. Global health is about mutual understanding, mutual collaboration. So yes, I beg, borrow, and then somebody will finally listen to me and give me some money. And that's how we've been able to sustain it. Do we have enough? Of course we don't have enough. We have to have buy-in, right? And you know, government will say, oh, we have other priorities, but every woman matters, you know, and lately I've been saying Black Lives Matter. Every life matters. And as much as Black people, colored people are in sub-Saharan Africa, there's been racism.
Can you hear me? I asked Dr. Ntekim, how long did it take for the ethical process? Did you find it a very challenging time?
Yeah.
On the ethical process?
Yeah.
Getting ethical clearance, I think, is one of the hindrances. What are your experiences?
Yeah. Yeah, with us, the ethical process wasn't a difficult thing, even at the 4 sites. Now, and they were all done within reasonable time because well, we have at the 4 sites, we have good ethical committees, even though they are not so much, they were not so much involved in oncology trials, but they have been managing trials related to maybe malaria, TB, and all those things. So the ethical process was quite timely. We didn't have issues and problems with them. Now, even in NAFDAC, as long as we satisfy all the NAFDAC, that is the Food Drug Administration Agency in Nigeria, there was no problem. So everybody cooperated because, I mean, they wanted to see this innovative trial happen in their time. So it wasn't a difficult thing at all.
Yeah, in fairness to them, they all wanted to learn, right? Even the ethical approval, you know, one of the first things we did was to start ethics research training. And, you know, our surgeon, Professor Ogundiran, is the one who actually runs the West Africa Bioethics Initiative. Because of our study, we saw all the ethical issues related to genomics research. And so over the years, we kept training people. And now that West Africa Bioethics Initiative is Professor Ogundiran's initiative. He can take it and he can continue to train people. And I'm hoping that we will use that to train people in West Africa, East Africa, so we can all develop our capacity across the continent without having to wait for people to do it for us from, you know, abroad.
So that is a very important point, being able to stand by ourselves. Because the other question is that Prof. Olapade was able to get funding for this study. How are we going to position ourselves, including aortic, to be able to go around and source for funding for research? That's my next question.
Well, you have to develop the investigators, okay? This is why one of the things that Jimmy Holland and Lynn Denny and James Holland that we negotiated for and we lobbied for was that aortic will run Big Cat, okay? Big Cat was to get young investigators going. When I first met Dr. Ntekim, he was probably just finishing his training in radiation oncology. When I first met you, you were probably just finishing your training. Now you are all grown scholars, right? How would the next generation be trained? You are going to train them because you are now the next generation. So this is why it is so important that aortic develop a strong partnership. And I lobby ASCO, I lobby AACR, I lobby NCI, and I say, don't give the money to us alone. Give the money to the African investigator. let them develop their capacity. And so by developing their capacity, they will now be able to develop the next generation. So yes, I think aortic and every single one will have to develop as an investigator. Now, I'm sure the next time that Dr. Ntekim wants to do a study, he doesn't need me anymore because he knows how to do it, right? The way they say is you watch one, somebody watches you do one, and then you do one yourself. So right now I'm watching him do his own because he has written his own protocol. I'm watching him. And once if those two are done, then it's over, right? We have independent investigators in Africa who can lead clinical trials of their own.
Yes, so that is one thing I find missing in a lot of our partnerships and collaborations is that the Africans are not the one taking lead of these studies, and this actually makes an exception. I think it's something that everybody should copy. It makes everybody more dedicated. They know the terrain and the context in which they work, so they are able better to be able to draw the protocols based on what is available and what they see. But Dr. Ntekim, what are your plans for training the younger generation, starting from aortic? Because now COVID has shown us the way that we can do a lot of things without meeting physically. We can do this by webinar or by like a modular program. So I think this is what is missing in our training. You have young people with you on your investigation team, and what are the plans for the future in training young people, not just in Nigeria, but in Africa?
Yes, thank you very much. I know that now there is high sensitization on clinical trials, and a lot of people have been trained, other webinars, and some of our people have also been trained physically. So people, most of the oncologists in Africa now are well aware of the need for clinical trials. Now, the only thing that needs is to bring in more people and then to be able to let them have an hands-on in the actual conducting of the clinical trials, because that is where you now put your learning into practice. Now, even with all the theoretical background I had, when I now face the trials, I now know a bit better, and then how to really be able to do things to suit the environment. So I am available. We are also training people in our locality, especially in good clinical practice, which is the main focus of clinical trial activities. So we are still looking for opportunities to join with the greater aortic body to be able to get people some practical tips on conducting clinical trials. And then there are other issues that we also need to focus on our institutions. We still have some other areas, especially when it comes to clinical trial administration, how to sign contracts and all those things. So I'm still learning some of those aspects in order to become a little bit knowledgeable. Or we need to bring in more people, more supportive staff that will manage the project aspects of the clinical trials. So that is the next phase that we are trying to develop now. Once we get that, then we are ready to go full time. And as it is, that we are also trying to bring in more centers gradually, assessing the facilities, letting people know what the prerequisites for clinical trials are, so that the facilities will be ready. It's not only the knowledge, although someone has to be there who has the knowledge to be able to anchor all the other things that needed to be put in place. So we also have to identify those who are actually interested in clinical trials, because it's a lot of work. People find it difficult to attend meetings. There are lots of meetings that have to be attended. So when we identify those who are able to, who are sincere in anchoring or being part of clinical trials teams, then we can bring in such people and then give them the practical tips, what they need to do, what each institution needs to do in order to be fully ready to anchor clinical trials in the sub-region.
Thank you. I guess remember when I was at the University of Chicago, clinical trials was just part of your schedule. It was just there and you had to do it. Now, in our curriculum in West Africa, which you and I are one of those who actually shaped this is actually quite missing. Okay, now we have the institution of dissertations in your final examinations. It's helping a bit, but there's no training to do that. I was actually quite upset when I was asked to review dissertations. I'm like, I never did this before because it wasn't part of our training. So do you think anything in our training now we could factor in that would change our perspective of our young people? Because research is joined to cancer, you can't do anything about it. What can we do to change this?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you brought up this question of training. So I met my good friend, John Wong, who is now the leading medical oncologist in Singapore. And he invited me to be an examiner in Singapore in the 90s, you know, just when I was just a young faculty. Because I do, you know, I have my role as a training program director at the University of Chicago. And when I got to Singapore, their training was actually modeled towards the British system, which was, you know, you do viva and you do oral exams and you do apprenticeship and that's it. And I went there and, you know, looking at the American curriculum that I had gone through, that John Wong and a few people from Singapore had gone through. Unfortunately, I failed the person I went as an external advisor to review. And I still feel badly about that because I thought that, you know, there was just some fundamental things that you must know as a medical oncologist. But it was because of the way I was trained, right? And I did not have appreciation for the fact that if you don't have a curriculum, if you don't have expectation of what people must know in terms of areas of research and work that is really important, and then of course that led to a huge debate in Singapore about how to reform their medical education and reform their curriculum. And a lot of Asian countries have reformed their training and their medical education because you have to become super specialized, right? You are now no longer just going to be jack of all trades. You are a primary care doctor, treat everybody. And so to be a qualified medical oncologist, to be a qualified radiation oncologist, treating adults with all these comorbidities, you need to know your medicine, right? And Dr. Ntekim will tell you, when you give bad drugs to patients, right? No wonder your patients are running away from you because you can't manage the toxicity, right? But if you are trained to be an internist, you know cardiology, you know physiology, you are a physician, right? You will be able to, your cancer patients are not going to frighten you because you know human physiology. So that's why when I came here and I was a good clinician, I already knew the differential diagnosis of everything on the planet because that's what they taught me in Africa. That's what I knew before I came to the University of Chicago. The only thing that was missing was I had no idea about the research process, the scientific process, how you ask questions. And then when you get one answer, you have to ask more. Until we cure everybody of cancer, there's so much that we have to learn, right? And then we started talking about patient-oriented research, right? Not animal models. We have cured cancer in rats, in mice, right? You take sample from patient, you study it in the lab. So that's what my mentor taught me, right? And we started curing leukemia and lymphoma. So the same thing, if you want to cure cancer in Africa, you have to get people to actually learn some science. And so that's what we call oncology sciences. So a good thing is the NCI is now putting out, RFA to train people in oncology sciences. We have, and Dr. Ntekim is going to be an associate program director. I hope they give us the grant, but I'm hoping that we can train oncologists in, as associated research. We can train medical physicists. How can you be a radiation oncologist and not know how to do medical physics and how to plan, right? Of course, your patients will have suffer on untoward toxicities. So because of the toxicities of our treatments, because of the toxicities of our interventions, we have to train experts who actually know how to handle those toxicities. The same thing, oncology, nursing. My nurses know more about how to manage side effects than I do. I'm just the the person, but they are there with the patient. And Dr. Ntekim will tell you when we have a DSMB, I'm talking to the nurses. I want to hear from the nurses because the doctors are going to hide things from me. Whereas the nurse will say, this patient had this side effect, and this is what I did to help them. So that's why oncology nursing must be part of what we develop to really have a robust training. And then what I call research leaders must learn basic science or the science of oncology. When you learn the science of oncology, you keep building on it. So both Dr. Fatih Regun and Dr. Ntekim, I know they went for advanced training, so they can learn the science that they are now going to be able to explain it to their patients. But they need dedicated time. And once you learn it, you never forget it, right? You can now direct other people. So we hope our training grant will be funded, and then we are going to start developing oncology sciences, and anyone in the basic science, and Dr. Atara will know the basic science of oncology is very important. Translational science is important, and then the clinical science where you actually do patient-oriented research is critical. It's all interdisciplinary.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're almost out of time, but I'll ask my final question. Are you going to include any patient-related outcomes, reported outcomes in your study? Because we don't have those at all in Africa. And I think it's good to hear from the patient's point of view.
Yes, what we have that represents that is the quality of life. We are assessing quality of life in our patients as during all the trajectory of the treatment. Now, from when they come in, during chemotherapy, during surgery, we have a psycho-oncologist attached to the teams that are monitoring all this. And good enough, they call these patients at home at their own time to find out whether they have some distress, and then they advise them, and then they see them each time they come to the clinic. So that is very much incorporated into our studies. It's one of the outcomes that we look at.
Yeah, and with Jimmy Holland, psycho-oncology has developed enormously in aortic, right? And so Dr. Asuzu is the psycho-oncologist that is integrated into into ARETTA. And last week when we had a group call, we were all afraid because of the protests and the trauma in Nigeria. And you know what? She even provided psychotherapy for the doctors, right? Group therapy. So I think what we're learning through all of this is that you need to have a community, and the community needs to come together, and we need to do things the way we would do it in Africa. So, we're all praying that there will be peace. At the same time, we're praying for peace. We're also encouraging each other to dance and to do things. So we do it the African way. Right? We're not going to be afraid because it's our neighbors. It's our patient. There are patients who don't have money for food. So the social worker is telling us, we need to give these people money. There's some patients who are on the study who are wealthy. Well, let them share in that wealth with those who are on the study who don't have food. So it's really where I'm so happy about this group, because they're doing it the African way, right? What do I know?
I think this is very important, that it has to be the recipient who takes charge and sets the priorities and what the issues are. And I hope that I wish you luck in this study, and I hope that the results are going to be translated into the all of us. And it looks like our time is up. And I want to thank you too so very much for enlightening us on the processes that went to this. And it is a springboard for all of us to jump on and perform our own clinical trials, or at least encourage our young oncologists to go into these fields and be able to improve the outcome of our patients. And we're able to let people understand the importance of these processes in breast cancer. It's not just about the pathological diagnosis, the gross specimen, but also the character of the tumor. It's like a signature, I always say, and that is how the patient is treated. And we'll be able to take these things more seriously. And we thank Chaotic for making this possible, and hope that we'll be able to expand this into the next meeting that is coming on in Senegal, and we see what other people are doing and get expandable. We can collaborate with other countries, including Ghana. So we are looking forward to your phase 3 trial on this.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Have a good night.